ladies and gentlemen, it is July 25th, 2010. We are live tonight on this very hot Sunday evening. And it's not just our bodies that seem to be cooking. It seems to be some of the tensions in the Yellow Sea in Costa Rica and also off the waters near Iran. So we'll do our best in the next hour to summarize a variety of news headlines that you need to be aware of that is not being covered in the proper context via the mainstream media. North Korea is at the top of our list, and this is a continuation of a number of stories we have been reporting in the last several weeks. We're also going to talk about the economy and some other new revelations as well with bank failures and some other interesting pieces of information. There's actually a Portland attorney named Mark Ginsburg. He actually fought a red light camera ticket and won. There's growing resistance against red light cameras across the nation at this time. And so it's definitely positive news to report victories. And of course, Chinese central bank outlines plans to ditch the dollar as the yuan's peg. And so all of these things are piling up. So we're going to begin tonight. We're going to show you some other videos as well. And actually an inspiring video with the voice of David Icke at about 30 after. But we're going to start with some of the other pieces of news, and then we will get to that point. And then, of course, some other interesting videos. North Korea warns of sacred nuclear war as U.S. carries out military drills off the Korean peninsula. This came out at 8:30 this morning. It's been talked about throughout the week. This is one of the latest reports. The two allies said the maneuvers were intended to send a strong signal to the North Korean country that aggression in the region will not be tolerated. It follows accusations that the reclusive communist state sank a South Korean warship in March, killing 46 sailors. There are many researchers out there in the online community that believe that this was in fact a false flag. In fact, the torpedo that sank the ship was made with German parts. U.S. naval vessels began the drills by setting off from South Korean ports where they had called last week. In a show of force timed with a high-level meeting between the two allies. In the maneuvers, the war games, it's codenamed Invincible Spirit. And it's to run until Wednesday with about 8,000 U.S. and South Korean troops, 20 ships and submarines, 200 aircraft. Now, they're right outside China. And among the vessels is the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS George Washington, which can carry 5,000 sailors and 70 aircraft. And so the exercises are being conducted in the East Sea off South Korea's east coast and in the Yellow Sea closer to China's shores and international waters. So China is running their own war games as well at this time, pointing about 2,000 missiles in the direction of Taiwan. Here's another headline. China shows military strength ahead of U.S. drill. This comes to us out of Reuters. And we are seeing more reports. I think we have the iris a little bit too hot on this, but there are many reports coming out at this time on this particular subject. China has shown off its growing military strength with naval exercises off its eastern coast shortly before Washington and Seoul are expected to carry out their own drills, which Beijing has criticized. State television broadcast images on Tuesday said it showed the East Sea Fleet on recent maneuvers, including helicopters and a submarine, launching a long-range missile underwater. Here's another one. Venezuela head threatens U.S. oil cut over Colombia row. Hugo Chavez has recently ended diplomatic relations with Colombia as a result of the U.S. buildup there. By the way, the United States has sent 7,000 Marines and 45 warships and 200 helicopters at this time to Costa Rica. Now, in this other report that recently has come out, U.S. vulnerable to nuclear attack. Threat of an all-out nuclear exchange between Russia and the U.S. may be less than it was during the Cold War, but defense experts say decades-long efforts to avoid a possible Armageddon have had a downside. The U.S. is now woefully unprepared for any kind of a nuclear attack. That's the conclusion of an influential Pentagon Defense Advisory Panel, which recently completed a comprehensive review of the nation's ability to respond to and survive a nuclear attack. The panel found that the expertise needed to survive a nuke attack had since decreased greatly since the end of the Cold War. Moving on quickly, Fidel Castro appears again, warns of war. Cuban revolutionary leader Fidel Castro took his warning of impending nuclear war to Cuba's foreign ministry on Friday, where he explained the reasons for his dire prediction, his fifth public appearance in 10 days. He said a devastating war is at hand if the United States, in alliance with Israel, tries to enforce international sanctions against Iran for its nuclear activities. He has also predicted the United States will attack North Korea. We're going to cover some things with the Gulf. The situation there with the oil spill, they claim they have capped it, but there's evidence suggesting that there are plumes coming up from the ocean, suggesting the leak is not in one place, but in multiple places, and there's a cover-up of how bad it actually is. Researchers confirm subsea Gulf oil plumes are from BP well. Through a chemical fingerprinting process, University of South Florida researchers have definitely linked clouds of underwater oil in the North Gulf of Mexico to BP's runaway Deepwater Horizon well. The first direct scientific link between the subsurface oil clouds, commonly known as plumes, and the BP oil spill. Until now, scientists had circumstantial evidence but lacked that definitive scientific link. But now they believe that we are going from a two-dimensional disaster to a three-dimensional disaster, and that is according to David Hollander, one of the 3 USF researchers credited with the matching samples of oil taken from the water with samples from the BP well. So what is happening down there on the coast with families? We talked about situations with domestic violence. It is up 320% since this oil spill took place. And we also see this as well. Fishing families turn to fast food and donated groceries. For thousands who can on the Gulf of Mexico to feed their families, what once seemed like a never-ending free buffet of ship crabs, oysters, and fish is now off limits. Even though BP has at least temporarily stopped the oil leaks, so this report claims, more than a third of the Gulf from Texas to Florida remains closed. The vital piece of information that you need to know is they're using Corexit, a dispersant that in fact harms wildlife and humans. It actually absorbs itself into the skin. It's highly toxic, and there's many concerns about a hurricane potentially moving not only oil but Corexit 9500. There's also a number of other versions of Corexit that I've heard mentioned, but it's a dispersant that we're not really getting a whole lot of information about in the mainstream media, but the information about it is exploding in alternative media at this time. But we see literally zero accountability, so that's one issue there. The dispersants that are being used, its effect to wildlife, human health, and the likelihood these dispersants can be carried by air via a hurricane during this ongoing hurricane season. So there are many communities that are ready to evacuate if they're given the word. There's a lot of concern in many Gulf communities that they might have to be evacuated. There's also a lot of denial as well. The governor of Florida said it was safe to swim in the ocean. There's a lot of damage control going on because a lot of wealthy people out there that don't want to lose in on their investments, which is the shipping industry down there. They're hoping for the best, but in reality, the same powers that be that they've supported all these years are ending up screwing them over as well. This is, though, a new revelation that I'm bringing to the table tonight pertaining to the people that are actually engaged in the cleanup themselves. Who are these people that the media is not allowed to talk to? Apparently, we just found out. The inmates of the Louisiana State Penitentiary. BP hires prison labor to clean up spill while coastal residents struggle. This is from The Nation. In the first few days after BP's Deepwater Horizon wellhead exploded, spewing crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico, cleanup workers could be seen on Louisiana beaches wearing scarlet pants and white T-shirts with the words inmate labor printed in large red block letters. Coastal residents, many of whom had just seen their livelihoods disappear, expressed outrage at community meetings. Why should BP be using cheap or free prison labor when so many people were desperate for work? The outfits disappeared overnight. Work crews in Grand Isle, Louisiana, still stand out. In a region where 9 out of 10 residents are white, the cleanup workers, are almost exclusively all African-American men. The racialized nature of the cleanup is so conspicuous that Ben Jealous, the president of the NAACP, sent a public letter to BP CEO Tony Hayward, who's now saying is going to step down, is also one of the guys